So, very, very good morning to everyone who's here, and welcome. And to those of you who are, more and more of you, in fact, who are watching on YouTube later, then good morning and good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is the fourth of 6 teachings on Prajnaparamita. And last year we did the first 5 paramitas, so now this is the 6th and final one. Let's start with good prayers and with the Bodhisattva heart, thinking we need to be here. We need to be here because we promised to help everybody. And so we've got a lot of work to do to make our minds perfect minds so that we can really help them, and study together is one vital part of that. So this morning we'll do the usual bodhicitta prayers. I want to add one little bit more from Shantideva, which I think many of you may know. And today, maybe after we've said the prayers, I'll say just a few words about Tibetan New Year. It's Tibetan New Year today. But it is, more importantly than that, it's the start of one of the 4 powerful times in the Buddhist year. And the next 14 days between now and full moon is a time when it's said there is a special energy, and what we do, good or bad, has more powerful karma. That's what they say. I don't know, but that's what they say. So many, many, many more times. So when we do our bodhicitta now, let's make a really good effort to pure motivation, and then a big mind, an inclusive mind. And we include, of course, all sentient beings throughout space, limitless. But very particularly, we include those who are connected to us in this life, positively, negatively, harmfully, helpfully, but our parents, our siblings, those who've been very much part of our life, very much part of our karma, and will be very much part of our future in other lives. So we try to be very inclusive, think we're here for them, even if we can't do anything more for them in this life. In future lives, we hope to. And then we try and make the love we feel for everyone the most real, deepest, truest love that we can tune into. And then we have a happy mind, because here we are, and studying Prajnaparamita together. Isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? I hope so. And so a happy mind doesn't cost anything. And part of our motivation, our prayers, should be done with a happy mind, not grumpy prayers, happy prayers. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on, until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality, to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, live in places of peace and plenty, and most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good things to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering and attain great equanimity, free of closeness or distance from anyone. Just as a blind person might find a jewel among heaps of rubbish, so this bodhicitta has somehow arisen in us. It is the elixir of life, produced to vanquish death in the world. It's an inexhaustible treasure, eliminating the poverty of the world. It's the supreme medicine that alleviates the illness of the world. It is a tree of rest for beings exhausted from wandering the roads of worldly existence. It is the universal bridge for all travelers to cross over painful states of existence. It's the waxing moon of the mind that soothes the mental afflictions of the world. And it's the great sun dispelling the darkness of the world's ignorance. It is fresh butter formed from churning the milk of Dharma. For the caravan of beings traveling the plains of worldly existence and starving for the food of happiness, it is a feast of well-being that satisfies them all. May we become guardians for those who need protection, guides for those on the path, boats, rafts, bridges for those who wish to cross the flood. May we be a lamp in their darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for boundless multitudes of living beings, may we bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings are freed from suffering and all are awakened. Dhyata shame shamavati shameta shatra kurim arajite karota keyore tejuvati ulayane pishudani male malapa naye kukure kaka grase grasana muki baramuki amuki shamme dawane sawa graha bandana negri Itva savabhava pravadina vimukta marapasha savidva buddham mudra anurgatita savamare putsarita parishuddhe vigashantu savamara kama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our heads on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. Thank you. So we return to Prajnaparamita. And we've already had 3 quite intense sessions with some very important things in them. I don't want to go back, but I do want to remind you of 1 or 2 very important things that I have sort of expanded. But in all of this, there's so much Prajnaparamita, we'll be touching on it very simply, but things to bear in mind while we go through some details. First, This is a frustrating course. It's a brief overview. We're looking at what, a lot of the time at least, we're looking at what philosophers say, think. We're looking at the depth and detail of Buddhist thought, Buddhist ideology, what's behind the Buddhist ethics and so on. It takes years to do it properly. In the Gelugpa study colleges, 6-9 years, 50 weeks a year, all day. It's a lot. And so in Ken Holmes' 6 brief talks, we are just dipping in, just looking at the main things. And my main interest is so that you don't make the mistakes that many people do, often because of the way terminology is misunderstood. So I do want to remind you about that. The big point that we'll see in a month or two's time when we look at the Dharma as a refuge is that Dharma, and in this case Prajnaparamita, has 2 aspects. There's the reality of it, and there's the theory of it, thoughts, concepts, stuff on paper, and so on. And there's always Dharma teachings as words, as sutras, as ideas, as philosophy and discussion. Words are just a reflection of thought, what we can think. But then there's the actual reality of Prajnaparamita, which is what I hope we're interested in. The truth of the matter. What's the truth of what's going on? So, of course, I can't sum up years and years of study in a few words, but in the Buddha's teaching, the main examples, like a dream, like a mirage, like a rainbow, like an illusion, like hypnosis, are really very relevant, because all these teachings are about shunyata, emptiness, voidness, and people can so misunderstand that as a kind of a dismissing idea. Doesn't matter, there isn't anything at all. That's not the Buddha's teaching. So when you see a mirage, once you know how it's made, do you stop seeing the mirage? No, it's still there, isn't it? Any different from before, what you see? Not one bit. And same if you see a rainbow in the sky. And so that's a big thing to think about when you say it doesn't exist. Mirage doesn't exist. And you're fully awakened to the science of mirage in a desert, it still manifests. The emptiness of the mirage doesn't mean, for us, in our experience, there's nothing there. So all of this, and I mentioned this last time, I think the time before as well, is none of the philosophers inside Buddhism or in the other schools are dismissing what we experience in our lives as our experience. What they're all talking about and disagreeing about and trying to present through Prajnaparamita teachings is what's really going on, what's the real truth of the matter, what's the ultimate, what's the absolute truth. And so we saw last time our definition of shunyata, the word emptiness, shunyata, emptiness, a voidness, whichever one we choose, is not a nothingness, it's not an absence, it's not a dismissal. Its voidness is the wisdom. Voidness is wisdom. In these teachings, Prajnaparamita, and especially in Mahamudra Dzogchen, then there is no other voidness than wisdom. There is no other wisdom than voidness. They're interchangeable. When somebody realizes emptiness, they're not in some huge space. They're in some huge wisdom. That's why it's called Rigpa in Dzogchen, it's called clarity or clear light in Mahamudra. Everything's so clear. So if we go back to the two sorts of Prajnaparamita, there's all the words and the philosophy and the idea and the debates and the arguments, conceptual stuff, and there's the real stuff. Then let's take 2 examples. Okay, nice examples. Let's have a bit of fun. We're supposed to have fun on Tibetan New Year. It's party day for Tibetans. Usually there's no teachings at all on Tibetan New Year. It's party day, have fun day. And so anyway, I'm breaking the rules, although they're not written anywhere. But let's take a simple example, fun example of a little child in a Superman suit, right? So the child's running around and, I'm Superman and can fly and do things and do x-rays with the eyes and change things. So when we see that, we don't need to go and consult Buddhist philosophy to know that the kid's in his own world, the kid's in his own reality and dream, which is very serious because, if he tears his Superman cloak and he can't look good anymore, they can cry, or they take their world very seriously. So the way we interact as wise grown-ups is with kindness, but fully factoring in the reality that in this case the child is in. This is the wisdom of shunyata. We understand that the world that people are in, the emotional world, the sensorial world, the perceptual world, is colored by so many things. We have respect for other beings, which is so important. Because each person is in their own illusion, we don't look down on them. We have respect for them and the world they're in, but at the same time, we're not in that illusion. And we understand more and more what's going on and why they're in that illusion and how to help them out of any suffering that's there. But the point is, voidness, emptiness, shunyata means wisdom. Being wise in each moment. The wisdom is new in each moment. It's a response. So one example is the Superman child. Let's take another example of a nurse in a recovery room. And so people are coming out of anesthetics, and sometimes when they're waking up, they're pretty spaced out there. They see things that aren't there. So of course, the nurse has to factor that in, understand it, deal with it. I remember a couple of times after going in for something under anesthesia and being in a room with sort of 4 or 5 other people, and I tend to wake up quickly from those things. And so you hear other people waking up. Sometimes it's okay, they're just groggy, but sometimes they're seeing things and people that aren't there, and they're pretty far gone. And it was really curious to see how the nurses dealt with it. But it's the same kind of thing. You're wise, you know the causes and conditions that make somebody's world the world they're in just now. We have the wisdom that sees the difference between what seems to be and what really is. It's what all this is about. The difference between what seems to be and what really is. Always remembering that with the example of the mirage and the rainbow, when you have the wisdom, the voidness, and you realize how those tricks of light give you an impression that's not true, still you see the rainbow, still you see the mirage. This is really quite important. Now we're in today, and in the section of the text that we're in a place which is more than anything connected to the second turning of the Wheel of Dharma, which is why you've got the support document for the Wheel of Dharma. And we're mainly in refutations, where the difference between what seems to be and what really is, it means, yes, it seems like that, but in fact it's not. So before we can get to what really is, we need the bit that realizes, oh, that was an illusion. That was mistaken. That was limited. It was wrong in some way. So that's why there's the three turnings of the Wheel of Dharma. So in this section today, I won't say it's boring, because I hope it's not boring, but let's say we're in the refutations part, and as we've seen already, these were the refutations from Mahayana Buddhists to non-Buddhist traditions' idea of what really and truly there is, but also to, within Buddhism, to the Shravaka view of what really is, and sometimes to the Yogacaryans or the Chittamatrian view. So it's all to do with people's ideas of what really is. And we've got a lot to do. So that's kind of a recap and recapitulation. And now, if you're following on the support document, we're on page 12. And a huge topic, not huge topic, an important topic, something you do need to take away from these teachings. One of the key points is that in Mahayana Buddhism, we refute, we see through the illusions of, that means, two types of self-entity, two types of self, two types of entity would be better, from the Latin word ens, E-N-S. So one type of entity is person. So it's the idea of a person, we see becomes the illusion of a person, if we look at it through Buddhist eyes. And so it's each being's idea of themselves. And then when it comes to religion and philosophy, the philosophical stance about who we really are. Like in Christianity, we are an eternal soul, and so on. So what we're looking at didn't involve Christianity. Christians weren't around in India. So we look at dialogue between Buddhists and various other faiths, but not Christianity. But had there been Christians, enough of them in India at the time, then Shantideva and Nagarjuna and all the others would have been taking the Christian view to task and seeing it. But anyway, just an example. One type of entity, one type of idea, belief, is that of a personal self. The other type is huge. It is the entity of, in English we say, what can we say? We have to say things. In Sanskrit, it's the word dharma. It's the voidness, the emptiness, shunyata of dharma. Now, the word dharma in Sanskrit has many meanings, 10 meanings in the dictionary. One of them isn't dharma, the Buddha's teaching. Dharma is the simple everyday word for things, phenomena. But the general idea is, once we believe in a self, a me, then me, is the observer, the experiencer of everything else. Everything else is dharma, things. It includes other people. For us, for them in their world, they're other people. They have the idea of me, entity, self. But for us, they're phenomena. They are phenomena in our life. So the entity of phenomena, of things, of dharma, if we use a more technical word, is the belief in the existence of things. Now, always in this, what we're refuting is not the existence of those things relatively for us. We're looking at beliefs in things really and truly existing in their own right. If you've not got this, you'll never get Prajnaparamita. If you get this idea, you'll understand a lot. All of this talk, all of this philosophy, and then within ourselves, our own understanding, is about whether there's anything that exists in its own right. It just exists. It is, no matter what. Doesn't depend on anything else to be what it is. If there was something like that, that is, all by itself, then we can say, philosophically, it exists. So other religions, and within Buddhism, the Charvakas, do believe that there are things with true existence. They exist all by themselves, not depending on anything else to be what they are. They are. Now, I'm hoping, as you're listening to this, you're thinking, but that's not possible, because that means that you've got a Buddhist mindset already. But this is what it's all about. The word exist and doesn't exist only means exists absolutely in its own right, independently. And if you think about that, if there were something that existed and didn't depend on anything else to be what it is, it would have to last forever. If it depends on something to be what it is, like its own battery, it's going to run out. If it depends on anything other to be what it is, other things change. So there is this idea that the universe exists, or that God exists, or that our divine soul, our eternal soul, exists, or that things exist out there, objects, people, whatever it is, the universe. This is what we're looking at the idea about whether they exist, absolutely in their own right, independently, changelessly. Nothing else. When we say it doesn't exist, we only mean that. It doesn't exist in those terms. The fact that it exists for us in our personal and group perception, because of our personal and group karma, nobody's contesting that. Nobody. And not just things, but the mechanics of things, the way life works. For Buddhists, it's cause and effect. For people who believe in an eternal God who exists, then there's creation, and so on. We're looking at the things, dharma, but dharma also involves the processes by which things happen. That's what we're looking at, very important. So we must know there are two types of, now depending on the translations you come across, two types of entity, two types of self. And in the Bodhisattva teachings, we see through all the illusions of those two, of a personal self and of things truly existing independently. So if we look on page 12, we look at the first one. What is this entity of a person's mind? Well, there are many views on this. In fact, this is Buddhist talking. In fact, this is the Buddhist view. What is referred to as a person is actually an unbroken continuum of self-reproducing aggregates. That's so Buddhist. What are you? I'm an unbroken continuum of self-reproducing aggregates, man. What about you? But it's almost like a legal document. There's a lot in it, and it's technically correct. Sometimes we add 3 words that attract suffering. An unbroken continuum of self-reproducing aggregates that attract suffering. Now, to explore this fully, we have all the basic teachings of Buddha. You'll find in all the Buddhist schools. Everyone accepts this is the basic message of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. It's there to get us out of suffering. It's priority number 1 that we understand that. Why do we get into what's suffering? Caused by karma. Why did we make the karma? Because we were angry, jealous, lustful, all those things. We had a mind that made us kill, steal, harm, say bad things, and so on. So there was our defiled mind. Where did all of the jealousy and the pride and the desire and anger come from? Our construction of a persona. It's the I don't like that. Oh, I love this. People say this. Oh, I love this. You see that kind of light up. There is a story of me. I love donuts. What was it? Was it Kennedy who went to Berlin and said, Ich bin ein Berliner? And Berliner is a type of donut, actually, but it's not a Berlin person. But anyway, he meant well. I am a donut, but I am a Berliner. Anyway, the suffering comes from karma. Karma comes from the defiled mind. The defiled mind comes from our construct of self, which is actually not one thing, a me, not a pig's thing, but the aggregates. So we study the 5 aggregates, We're not doing that today. It takes a lot of time. But we see we are forms, our mind. We're looking at our mind. Our mind has forms, like a set of references that we juggle around in our story of reality and our story of me, my mum, my dad, the village, the road, the government. We have all of these forms in our mind. And then second, we have feelings. So when those forms manifest in our mind, we feel good about them. We don't feel good about them. We have no particular feeling, neutral. So we have reactivity to forms that manifest moment after moment, feelings. We have cognition. So the key to understanding cognition is to put RE in front of it, recognition. We recognize the forms, and the recognition involves naming them, sometimes for us humans, and in depth defining them, not everything you find on Wikipedia. Cognition, recognition. Fourth aggregate is a complicated one. It kind of groups together everything else that's not in the other four. It's called samskaras, mental activity, mental functions. And number 5 is consciousness. Very simple definition of consciousness. It is connection of us, the observer, with what is experienced. Visual consciousness connects us to forms, hearing consciousness to sound, and so on. 5 sense consciousnesses, and mind consciousness connects us to our mind's data bank of references. So when we observe these, and we try and find a self, a fixed me in there, we never do. It's what we all do as Buddhists. We go looking for me. And what we find, with the great help of meditation, mindfulness, awareness, is second after second, split second after split second, there's a form, there's a feeling, there's a samskara, there's a new consciousness, there's cognition, our mind's labeling, talking, and so on. We see all of that at work, and that's all there is. It's what we are. It's changing all the time. It's being programmed by our actions, by our reactions. That's what we really are. That's why it says, in fact, that's what we are. Self-reproducing means that what we get up to in one life, because of all of these 5 interacting, creates karma that keeps the 5 aggregate story rolling. And we'll carry on doing so until we stop it. So we are an unbroken continuum of these self-reproducing aggregates, accompanied by intelligence that is wild and excessive. Wild and excessive. Always thinking this and that. I hope you're not like me, but I'm always thinking about this and that. What? Thinking. There was a song in the 60s. I can't remember it, but it was something like, I think, thank, thunk, and I thunk, and I couldn't think of anything better. And it's going on all the time. Anyway, this is what Gampopa says. About this, the Sutra of Fragments says, the term individual. What does individual mean? In, not, divid, divided. So a whole, or a one, something that can't be divided, is in fact constant moving and scattering. What we think of as an individual is not something, someone, cannot be divided. On the contrary, what somebody is this stream, this mind stream, this consciousness stream of the 5 aggregates. Now, they're there, like it or not. We put an end to this life, or this life comes to an end, the five aggregates continue, continue, continue. They're not what we're looking at in Prajnaparamita. That impermanent, interdependent flow, we're not saying, be careful with my words here, but we're not really saying that doesn't exist. It's the idea we project onto it that's not true. It doesn't have the true existence we think. So here we see the problem is not what's there, your life, your consciousness, your perception, everything, that all the bits and pieces of you is not the problem. The problem is when we project a fixed persona, a fixed me onto it. We have four aspects of me. How we define ourselves is what I mean. We define ourselves as me. Number one, we define ourselves as mine, because what we have, what we own, also defines us. And then we, where we identify often with small groups like a family or a couple, the we becomes very much the way you define yourself. And then there's ours, me, mine, us, ours. So we're looking at these ideas that make something more concrete, more real, more solid than is actually there. It's our relationship to what's happening through the power of karma that causes the suffering. And in discussing it, we have a word in Sanskrit, some of you may know from previous courses, which is graha. Graha. And the translation of that word is inadequate because it means so many levels of things. And you'll find various attempts at translating it, none of which is good enough because it covers too much in its original sense. And there's no one English word or French word that covers all of that. You'll very often hear Tibetans who have English use the word clinging. Clinging. For all aspects of graha. Clinging is a very powerful word. When you cling to something or cling to somebody, it's not like holding. Clinging. Don't let me go. Don't go away. We're holding on to something. Clinging is a strong word. In America, Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings, he uses words that have caught on a lot, words like fixation. But fixation is a strong word psychologically. Fixation is a very powerful thing. Whereas here, we're looking at something that's happening all the time. Some of the time we are clinging, we are very clingy. True. Some of the time we are fixated. True, but that's not what graha means. So it's got many levels of meaning, graha. The biggest level, you have this on page 12 still, is to cling in the sense of emotional attachment. We cling, we don't want to let go, and we can get very upset when our clinging is challenged. So there is that, let's say, heaviest weight meaning. Medium strength meaning of this same graha, which in Tibetan is dzimpa, means to believe in. It's just simply what we believe is. That goes very deep. Not necessarily a voiced belief, a philosophy, a religious dogma, credo. It's really what we believe is. And the vision we hold, this idea of holding is very much graha, holding, not necessarily grasping, but holding the vision we hold of what is, who we are. So believing in. And I mention in the text here, in English they say seeing is believing. So we believe very much what our senses perceive. And say, I've seen it with my own eyes. I heard it with my own ears, and so on. We take our senses as proof. A more subtle sense of the word is to perceive. And this goes deeper than believing. It's like the most subtle level of belief. It's how we perceive things to be. And so one example that's often given for this is water. If there were such a thing as water all by itself, without sentient beings, if there were such a thing, then we are considering how the beings of the six realms would experience it. For me, water is something I drink or sometimes swim in, but I don't live in it like a fish. For a fish, water is something you live in. It's your whole world. It's your environment. For me, it's not an environment. It's just something that's a tiny part of the environment. So for a fish, it's a whole world and very important. For a hungry ghost, a preta, even though they're so thirsty, when they drink water, it tastes like acid. It's a very, very painful thing for them. And the same for the hell realms. It's experienced as like molten metals if you're in that state of mind. For the Deva realms, it's like nectar. So this is really how it's perceived all day long. A fish doesn't have a belief in water, but it perceives water in the way it does. And we perceive water in the way we do, and so on. So this constant and deepest level of perception is graha, what we hold on to. And as our understanding of our own mind, what's happening each moment becomes awakened, then our illusions, the way we do perceive, the way our senses work for us, our beliefs in the reality of things, and then our voice beliefs and our philosophy and what we will cling to, they will all be challenged. They'll all change. We should expect that. We should expect that and be ready for it. So we've done that. There are so far two types of self-entity, and then graha is the problem. We either cling to reality, or at least we believe in it, or we perceive things in the way we do as human beings conditioned by our karma. We're all different from each other, even in the world that we commonly share. Some people like ice cream, some people can't stand it. Kids don't want to eat their spinach. Some adults love their spinach, same kid when it grows up. All of this is graha. It's our involvement. Involvement's a good word. Involvement with things. So Saraha says, if there's no more graha, that's it. You've finished your Buddhist journey. It's all about this graha. Nothing else. Covers everything. So anyway, two very important points. Two types of self-entity and graha. Now and then in terms of the self-entity of an individual, then we're clinging to the idea that there is a lasting me, a constant me, and that's an illusion. The self-entity of things, we're on page 13 now, or the phenomenal self-entity as it's called in the text, from translations. It's the Dharma. If we look at the word Dharma, as Khenpoken does, he says Dharma is the holding of specific characteristics. So when we say the voidness of Dharma, of things, what do we mean by things, and why do we have 84,000 Dharmas? Very often people say, 84,000 teachings of the Buddha, but it's just the different combinations of what it says here. A Dharma is what holds its own characteristics. So fire is hot and burning. If it's not hot and burning, it's not fire. Water is wet and fluid. I'm talking about liquid water here. Liquid water is wet and fluid. Things have their own characteristics. Our science today is so expert at making categories and subcategories and knowing this type of butterfly looks almost like that one, but it's not, because this is different, or this flower's got bigger this or bigger that, so we give it a different name. Diseases, medicine, science defines and subdefines. So when something has those characteristics, that's its Dharma, what holds its characteristics. So we're looking at the different life possibilities that can manifest to us. They are the Dharmas. Different life possibilities that can manifest. So now we've defined them, the idea of an entity, a self, personal self, and then things that the self experiences and interacts with, dharmas. Then we come to the refutations, that those don't exist. Not in the sense of English don't exist. They do exist relatively, but absolutely they don't exist. Really and truly, they don't exist as we perceive them. Like the mirage doesn't exist as we at first in ignorance perceive it to be water over there. So the refutation of individual self entity, Nagarjuna says, is deviant. It deviates from what's really true. And that's the first thing that Khenpoken says. Why is this? Because we are followers of the Buddha. And he says, if ego, if a self, cosmic Ken, an eternal Ken really existed, then someone who is fully the wisest person, the most awakened person, will be the one who sees exactly what it is. Buddha. When somebody wakes up, even wakes up to first bodhisattva level, but all fully awakened, Buddha, no one has ever found a self. Of course, there's our illusion of self, but a really, truly existing Ken that doesn't depend on anything or anyone to be the Kenness, nobody found, ever. We should have a reward, $100 million reward for the first person who finds a self. Then people would look really hard and would be motivated. So we won't go into it now because we've got a lot to do, but if you do care to read the bit in brackets that covers most of the page, where it starts, this is a very interesting statement, you should find that's quite interesting. So please do read it. Now, the way that Prajnaparamita approaches self and refutes the idea of self is that Buddhists, non-Buddhists, Charvaka Buddhists, we're in that world, people talking about what really is. Then, apart from the Prajnaparamita Buddhists, the others have an idea of being, manifesting, coming into being. Sometimes how it all started, like Christianity has a creation story. People at the time of Buddha had coming into being stories. This word for coming into being is often translated as born or arise. We come mainly in the negative, the unborn. I'm sure you've seen this many times in Buddhist texts, the unborn. Here we're looking at the Buddhist understanding as opposed to other people's understanding that something really is because it comes into being. So we're refuting other people's ideas of coming into being. And there are four possibilities. There are many, many different beliefs, complicated stories, but if you cut them down to the bone, they're saying one of four things. Things come from themselves, self-produced. That's one. Number two, they're produced from other than themselves. Number three, they're produced from a combination of themselves and something other. Self and other. Number four, no cause. This covers most things, or is said to cover most things. Production from self, from other, from self and other, or no production, no cause. So we're going to look at those. Very briefly, bottom of page 14, page 15. In fact, what we'll do, we'll go through those 1, 2, 3, 4 on page 14 and 15, and we'll combine them with middle of page 15 onwards. That will save time, and time's running away like nobody's business. So the first one, arising from self. Why are we looking theoretically at why things can't arise from themselves? In general, the idea is simply, how can something arise from itself? It's already there. So What's it going to do? Give rise to itself? It's already there. If this is already here, this thing I'm holding up in the camera, there's nothing needs producing. It's already there. That's the basic kind of, what? Production from itself makes no sense. It's already produced. Does that make any sense or nonsense to you? No. So when the penny drops, it's like, of course, how could it be? This is crazy. Thing doesn't need to produce itself. But when we look at the idea, what we're looking at is Prajnaparamita people arguing against the Samkhyas. The Samkhyas in India, they had really good philosophy. I mean, it's really very, very good. Okay, we can pick faults with it, but it's really getting there. It's really close to the truth. And the Samkhyas, as practices, became very beautiful spiritual people. Worth arguing with them, not nonsense. Maybe they were right. And part of the reason for debate is to find out, are you right in the end? Or am I right? Not just believing, but being open to total questioning. So their idea, some of you may know it if you've done Indian studies, is about Purusha, Prakriti, and how it's like all of the universe is already there. All the results are already there. And what we're doing in the moment and over time is we're making the causes that pull that result out of the cosmos. It's like if you're in the London Underground and you stay in trains in the underground system, you can change trains, you can go on this line and that line, but then once you've done all of it, you're back at King's Cross, you're at Cockfosters, you're at here, you're there. There's no more. That's all there is on the London Underground. But if you buy this ticket and get on that train, you'll end up there. You buy this ticket, that train, you'll end up there. And sometimes when we have quite deep, open experiences, it feels like this. I'm at station 3056 of the cosmos. I'm crying my eyes out in a garden somewhere because done this before. Many other people are doing it. 10 years later, you come across somebody sitting in a garden, looking over some dandelions, crying their eyes out. You think, I've been there. I know that one. You're at station 500 and whatever it is, of all the possibilities of life. Everything's there, but not manifest in the moment. This kind of idea, I put it very simply, the Samkhya's philosophy is very elegant, very thorough. But it's that kind of idea. So everything is there and the cosmos is just manifesting itself. When I talk with Christian theologians, they said, most Christians' idea of a one-off at the beginning creation, said that's not what we believe. When we go to theological college, what we believe is called continuous creation. Is the body of God is manifesting every moment in different ways. And so it's very much in the moment and to do with the presence of the divine. But anyway, the fact that everything is there, everything is God, or everything is the sacred, which is manifesting this way or that way or another way, but nevertheless it is showing itself. And sometimes in many religions, very deep, beautiful religions, we get this feeling of what is happening now is not me experiencing, but it's the divine, infinite cosmic mind experiencing itself through me. This kind of thing, this kind of attitude. So then the middle way philosophy, the Prajnaparamita, looks at the process, their idea of creation, it uses very much like what we have in mathematics as differentiation. We go down finer and finer and finer to the shortest moments of time, about before creation, the moment of creation, after creation, and think what really happens there. If something arises, that takes time. If there's no time, and the cause and the result and the arising are all in the same moment, there's no need to talk about arising. Or if you do, the arising lasts for eternity. So when we talk of arising, we must be talking of something in time where something that wasn't there comes into being. We're looking at the coming into being, not just as a vague idea, but looking right, it's go down to the instance of time. Something that wasn't there then is there. And then if it arises from itself in the moment before, when what is there wasn't there, that's supposed to be itself, but itself isn't there because it's the moment before, right? And we're not going to argue it. We're not going to go there. We need weeks if we get more into this. I'm telling you what they're talking about. Finished. I've done my job. If you want to know more, read the books, debate with Buddhists, but that's basically the idea. It makes no sense. Production from other, the second thing we're refuting, and here we're mainly looking at Buddhist ideas. We're looking at the Charvakas ideas, in particular, those who follow the Abhidharma, who've analyzed the five aggregates to go beyond the idea of self, but they make the five aggregates really existing. There is no me, but there is a feeling. There is cognition. There is form. There is consciousness. That's why the Heart Sutra, which sums up these Prajnaparamita refutations, says, no ear, no eye, no nose, no tongue, no this, no that. It's the No Sutra. And so for them, Buddhists, Abhidharma followers of the lesser vehicle, then those moments of mind exist. Their big deal is moments of mind. So in looking at that, there is an idea of production from other, cause and effect. We're looking at causality, karma, cause and effect, production from other. So again, it's like differentiation. Now, there's other in common language, in common thought, and we're not talking about that. Other is in our minds. This is the point. Others in our analysis of the universe, of things. Oh, there's a this, there's a dog, and there's a cat. They are other, they're different. Or even there's a black dog and there's a white dog. Or there are two white dogs, but one's a big white dog and one's a small white dog. They're other. Chihuahua and a Great Dane. Our ideas of other that sort things out, we're not talking about that here when we say production from other. Because logically, real other out there in reality, not in our heads as people with definitions, in the reality of things, for something to be other, things have to exist at the same time. You have, I'll go back to my funny little pot. You might be wondering what it is. It cleans glasses. It's a spray, right? So once there is this, right now, in this moment, then everything else, there is this, and everything else, no matter what we think is other than this, out there in reality, not in my definitions, there is this, so other can be defined because of this. Here there's a microphone. It is other. Other can only exist when this exists. Take away that, destroyed, pulverized, atomized. This can't be other. This is just a microphone. It has nothing to be other to. So we think about that. I can't convince you. All the philosophers, give them enough time, will convince you, but other has to exist in the same time to be other. If it exists in the same time as the result, to be other, then it can't make it. It can't create it, can it? Because they both exist already. Something like that. Okay. And when you think about these things, sometimes at the end, it becomes ludicrously simple. Of course not. And you see that humans, philosophers, religious people, and so on, it's like when you beat something up in the kitchen and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger when you make meringues and things like that. They make these ideas into whole beliefs. And so, anyway, some idea like that is all we can do today. When you've looked very closely into these ideas of something being produced from itself or being produced from what is other, and you realize it can't work, then the idea, the third idea, a mixture of self and other, is not just a woolly argument, like you've argued with somebody, no, it can't come from itself. All right, well, it comes from other. No, that can't happen. Well, some kind of, mixture, self and other, and get kind of woolly, and woolly means vague. But this was actually the belief of the Jains, and Jainism came at the same time as Buddha's teaching. It was very powerful, very pure teaching, so much wonderful things to be said for it. Then amongst the Jains, there was one particular set with their own sub-philosophy called the naked ascetics. They still exist. Sometimes you see them on the films. There's every 12 years, there's this huge pilgrimage in India up to the mountains, Himalayas. And you sometimes see these naked sadhus, some of whom are Jains. So they said, no, if you take a pot, for instance, on a potter's wheel, what makes it come into being? What makes our karma happen? It's a mixture of what's in there and some other influence. So they say the pot, the clay that makes the pot is itself, coming from itself, but it needs the hands of the potter to shape it, to end up the pot that it is. So they've got ideas truly based on there's something that comes from within and something that comes from external influences. So like from within, we've got our stream of consciousness from past lives, but it takes our future mum and dad to come together to give a body for that, to find expression and to continue its story, that kind of thing. But there the refutation applies both the refutation of from self and from other. The last one, number 4, is the idea of a group called the Charvakas, and they said, it's like people these days say, religion It's just humanity's attempt to imagine we can be eternal, part of some bigger picture, something spiritual. Sorry. And it's like my late brother-in-law used to say, quoting, the mind produces ideas like the kidneys produce urine. So our kidneys make pee, and our mind produces ideas in a vain attempt to be more than just a product of evolution, product of nature. When you die, you die. There's no reincarnation, there's nothing, there's no soul, nothing, none of that. Everything just is. So, where were we? So there's a reputation for the Charvakas. That's quite simple. If everything just is, and there is no causality, that's the main thing, no causality. And sort of this, no causality, just things happen. Then anything could come from anything. Anything could happen. I could turn into one huge piece of broccoli right in front of your eyes if things can just happen. There's no causality. And obviously that's not the case. Now, so we're just looking at, I'm not here to convince you. I can't do that. There's no time. I don't have the skill. We're just looking at what they're getting up to with these things and the main arguments they use. Now, on page 17, we come to Gampopa presenting more practical approach, very important for us because we can actually do this rather than think it as philosophy. We can explore to deflate our own illusions. So we look at who we are, we look at the body, we see that the body is nothing more, nothing less than the four main elements at work, the elements which become then chemistry, physics, and all the rest on a larger level, but basically the elements. And we find it doesn't exist there. Is it rather not the body than the mind? And then Gampopa says, mind, nobody ever found it. Nobody, not even Buddha. We see it at play all the time, but mind that's doing all this, nobody found it. And so if we don't believe that, then we need to go looking ourselves to find our mind. And in the way that people say, this is your mind doing this is your mind doing that. Like this is Ken doing this is Ken doing that. As though there was a basic player, a fixed identity. Your mind can do lots of things, very skilled, but your mind does this, does that, is this. Nobody found this basic player that does all of that, even Buddha. And then it says, what am I? I'm Ken. So it says, is it in the name? Well, if we call the dog Ken, does the dog become you? Is it in this name that we become used to? The next big section, because most of that was about looking at our individual self as an entity, is the refutation for Dharma, things, phenomena actually existing. That's refuted, first of all, in terms of stuff out there. They don't exist. So there's what is perceived, it's called percepts, and the perceiving mind, perceiver, percepts and perceiver. First we look at percepts to see that really and truly, absolutely, they are not what they seem to be. No one's arguing with what they seem to be. We're looking at what are they really and truly. Are they God? Are they the cosmos? Are they whatever? And So this bit is interesting, but we'll skip it because it is mainly looking at the ideas of a material universe as opposed to a mind. I think we live in a world, it's very relevant for us. You can read the pages of the support document, but the feeling we have is that I am an awareness, a mind, a consciousness experiencing a material world. The material world exists, meaning matter exists. At the time of Buddha, in India, in Greece, in lots of the civilized world, joined up by caravans and traders, there were what we call particularists who believed that the world is made of tiny building blocks, which they called atoms. In Greece, they called the word atom, was coined around time of Buddha by Greek philosophers for the tiniest particles, which will be the building blocks of the universe. And it's the idea, it's like differentiation, it's the lowest level you can go down to. They can come together in different ways to make all the realities we experience, but these are the basic building blocks because we are looking for something that really exists independently, that is in itself, in its own right. So there's this idea in India, in Greece, in many places, of basic matter. And so the logic attacks the idea that there was of matter, and in particular, how these particles were partless. They're the tiniest, so they can have no parts. So it's looking into the logic of how they can join together if they don't have parts, in the way that people believed at the time. So amongst them, there's a group of Buddhists called the Sautrantikas. They believed that the world, there is a material world, that's a huge belief, material world, there is one, and that it's made of basic particles which exist, which truly exist. And then what we perceive is a large-scale level of these basic particles coming together in all sorts of ways. It's not too different from our science. So, middle way, Prajnaparamita followers see a world, experience a world made of molecules, atoms, particles. That's what we experience. We're looking at whether or not they truly exist. And I think I sent you, or in fact I know I sent you, some quotes from modern physicists, quantum physicists, because there's a huge move forward in physics in the 20th century. And this was for many physicists to realize that it is not a case of mind and matter, awareness in a material world. They are not two separate things. So I'd like to read you their quotes, and in case you're interested. Where is it? Okay, Schrödinger, the cat guy, but one of the founding fathers of quantum mechanics. Mind has erected the objective outside world from its own stuff. Max Planck, who was one of the great founding fathers of quantum, all matter originates and exists only by virtue of force. We must assume behind this force the existence of conscious and intelligent mind. Mind is the matrix of all matter. much more recent physicist, Michael Brooks, talking about quantum entanglement, said, "We now have to face the possibility that there's nothing inherently real about the properties of an object that we measure. In other words, measuring those properties is what brings them into existence." Very famous physicist John Wheeler says, "The universe does not exist out there, independent of all acts of observation. Instead, it is, in some strange sense, a participatory universe." And then Astronomer Royal, Professor Martin Rees, "In the beginning, there were only probabilities. The universe could only come into existence if someone observed it. The universe exists because we are aware of it." And then the last one, a physicist called Zurek, he's taken a bit of Shakespeare and turned it round, talking about quantum stuff, the stuff they're observing in quantum physics. "It's the dream stuff is made of. Not the stuff that dreams are made of, but the dream that makes stuff." So when we look at these refutations of particles and how there is not a separate material reality, the Prajnaparamita people of those earlier centuries were doing basically what the quantum physicists of the last century were doing. They were looking into, and they have lots of tools to do that now, what is out there, if anything. And they came to the conclusion that the universe as we observe it is simply that, the universe of our own experience, our own observation. What is out there beyond our observation? Well, and now, so then Gampopa says, "Mum may wonder then, well, what is actually manifesting just now? It is an image in the mind, which appears to the mind as being an outer world. This occurs through delusion. If you ask, how can we know that? Then the answer is simple. And then this is, when we study in Buddhism, we use three approaches. One is scriptural authority, the other is reason, and the third is examples. So he says, first, through scriptural authority, Buddha said in the Flower Adornment Sutra, very famous one, descendants of good family, the three domains of existence are merely mind, simply mind, just mind. Hard to translate that. In Sanskrit it's matra. Chitta, mind, matra, simply mind, just mind, only mind. Now that quote is very, very famous. It's led to a whole school of Buddhists called Mind Only Chittamatran school. Their views are very important, very much used in Mahamudra. They're tools that they evolved for working with the mind, analyzing mind. But it's Buddha saying everything is mind. So our mind, disturbed by karma, cause and effect, produces our experience of what seems to be an outer world. Example is a dream. When we're dreaming, we are totally convinced we're in a world which is other, until we wake up, when we realize that it's a world totally generated by our minds. Number 2, refutation through reason presents a syllogism, a logical argument. Unless we've studied the rules of debate and the logical argument, then we see that it is impossible for an outer world to exist. And here we come across some examples of things that can be in the mind but can't be in reality. A rabbit's horns is one. So we can imagine a rabbit with horns. These days with AI, you could produce an image of a rabbit with horns. But you can go out there and find deer with horns and cows with horns, but you won't find a rabbit with a couple of antlers or horns on its head. In reality, it doesn't exist. That's one. Another is a tortoise's fur. Again, we can imagine a furry tortoise, furry like a dog, but out there, you won't find one. And then the third one is the child of a barren woman. The words kind of make some sense. Here we're mainly looking to the future, what we can imagine in the future. But if the woman cannot have children, then there's no way there's going to be a son or a daughter in the future. So, here we come to usually a more explanation of the 6 realms and how each type of being is very much in their own reality. The animals, the humans, the gods, the hell beings, the pretas, and so on. I think these days we'd be more inclined, because we don't actually get the opportunities to visit the preta realms or the hell realms or the deva realms to see what it's like. We can't get in their minds. We might be more inclined through psychology and modern thinking to just realize how much everyone is so much in their own world. What's a beautiful place for some. I've got a very good friend, and he likes desert places, not sandy deserts, rocky deserts. He went once to an area of Spain. He said, wherever you looked, you couldn't see a single tree. It was all rock. Like, so beautiful. I thought, no. So I really like trees. So what was him fame? To go and stay there for 5 days would be wonderful. For me, it would be like a torture. Be looking for green. And so on. We see how everyone's in their world, how their mind colors their world so much. And we have to ask ourselves the question, how much? And the conclusion is 100%, but it gets complicated because we have to take into account collective karma. In brief, through extensive, there's 100,000 verse Prajnaparamita, extensive reasoned argument that can stand challenging, because they were debating for many centuries with other religions and winning. The Prajnaparamita destroys the illusion of there being a separate outer reality that we are experiencing. All is mind. All is mind. The outer percepts, if they can't be proved not to exist, then the idea of an inner perceiving mind is automatically gone. It's not that we are an awareness perceiving a world made of atoms or whatever, if that world of atoms doesn't exist, then a perceiving mind, aware of it, is no longer a big deal. In words, we can say now the percept is mind and the perceiver is mind. It's mind perceiving itself. And of course, we explore that idea and see it's not possible because your mind would need to be split in two, which is the deluded reality we're in, duality. But in fact, it's not the case when we explore it. A mind couldn't perceive itself just as a sword cannot cut itself, no matter how fast. You do the sword can never cut itself. The eyes can never see themselves. Of course, in a mirror, but they can't actually directly see themselves. No outer percepts, no inner perceiving mind. I'm not here to convince you, I'm just here to tell you what's going on. I'm sure you've got many questions. We all do. It takes years. Then I'll leave you with the commentary. I've got, because I need to finish, to page 23, where it says point 2. In the arguments, it says the perceiving mind doesn't exist as such, as something real, as something existing in its own right, a perceiving mind existing in its own right. A mind that really exists, remember, really exists. Doesn't exist because no one ever found it. Now, this takes us away from theory and into our practice on the Mahamudra path, on the Dzogchen path, many Buddhist paths, where, forget what the others said, we on our meditation cushion try and find our mind. And we do our very best. We don't, and ideally we need to forget everything we've ever learned, read, all the conclusions, what Buddha said, what Nagarjuna said. You're just in there, aware of what feels like my mind, and we try and find out what it is, where it is, whatever we can about it to try and find mind. Good luck. It's one thing that's at the very heart of our growth. And it's very real because we're not listening to somebody else's ideas. We're dealing with our own sincere, long-term investigation. And we find, of course, that it concurs with what Buddha said, what Nagarjuna said. But it is so real and it's so powerful. And then as we interact with other people and see how they didn't get it, it becomes even more real. This absence of a fixed entity, a definable entity. And even if you can't define it in words, that you can find inside yourself, which is your mind, and nobody ever did. Or mind as a something, a cosmic mind. So we have to finish there for today. Very frustrating teaching for me, because I just wish we had weeks and weeks and time together, and I wish I was brighter and more skilled than I am, and so on, and that you could enjoy these in the way I've enjoyed them for weeks and weeks and months with teachers and going into the details and studying the texts in detail. lots of detail, very thoroughly. So that's it. Next week, it becomes more interesting because we look under the heading, what then is our path to liberation? What is liberation? What is nirvana? And it's a wonderful section of Khenpoken's teaching next week. We're away from the refutations. I mean, in the end, they believe this, they believe that, they believe that. So what? Let them carry on believing it. What's important is, what do we believe? So if our beliefs in some areas overlap what we've looked at today, then it's interesting for us, because sometimes we always had this feeling that maybe there's this cosmos manifesting this and that, or whatever. If you had that, then those arguments become relevant for you. But next week, we look at what is our path. We're not negating, we are, in a way, affirming, showing the way. Thank you very much. So, it's supposed to be a lot of virtue today. It's the first of our 14 days of celebrating Buddha's miracles. So let's do a wonderful dedication. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. Through the main enemy, our mind's defilement, being completely defeated. And through that, may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by its waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. May its development know no setbacks. And may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you. Well, anything?
So many possible questions, Ken. I did have a little one. If you took a human being and you take away their illusion of self, you take away their illusion of matter as well, what's left?
Wonderful question. A human being without illusions. Experiencing what really is. I should have saved it to my computer. I saw yesterday a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh precisely about this, about in each moment, if we take away absolutely all of our presumptions, projections, then we experience reality as it is.
And from a human being's perspective, is that simply a mechanical sense experience?
I think there we'd need to, for me to give you a good answer, I think we'd need to look at which path we're following of the different Buddhist paths to say what happens, because there is no way that these illusions are going to fall away overnight. It will take years. In the best of cases, usually it takes, they say 12 years, right? And the grosser delusions, It's only when they're gone that we see the more subtle illusions, the graha that we have, the way we have beliefs in the way things are, the way things work, the way we actually perceive. So it will take time. That time is called the path. And then when we look at the path and the things that are the milestones on the path in terms of how our awareness changes as the illusions drop away and as the karma is purified, then we see things like the powers, the siddhis they're called, that emerge through our shamatha practice, so formal meditation practice. As our delusions drop away, then they're one of the main barriers, along with our karma, that stops Buddha mind from awakened mind from manifesting. So Buddha mind will manifest. If it's on our kaju path, which has a large element of devotion, then we will feel what we call the blessing of the lineage, which is a sacred experience that no words can ever describe, but it's there. The presence of our guru, the presence of the lineage, which would automatically replace our delusion of self. The lineage is not, it's not mainly blokes out there in robes on a refuge tree. Not that lineage. The lineage is the inner transmission of enlightened awareness. It's the transmission of Buddha mind. So we can start to experience that more and more. It becomes indistinguishable from the presence of our guru and the guru's blessing. So instead of having inside a me, we have our guru's blessing, and through that we feel all the blessing all the way up to Milarepa, Mapa, Naropa, and Saraha and Vajradhara. And as that inner blessing is there, then the fact that everything is mind conditioned by our experience becomes so vivid that we just experience in the moment that the outer we're experiencing is an image of outer in our own mind. And because we're cultivating bodhicitta, that's why we become everybody. And this life we have becomes the servant of everybody, because our delusions of a personal self have gone, but other beings haven't, and they're hurting because of that. And we feel them, we feel for them, we feel with them, and our life is a gift to them. So the perception itself mechanically changes. We see what are called pure lands. We see everything in a very pure way. We feel everything in a pure way, including our fellow beings. We experience them through nothing but love. So there are lots of things. That's why we study the path, and studying the path is a very important element for understanding shunyata, because shunyata doesn't mean a something, a state of shunyata. It means our growing wisdom as the delusions fall away.
That's a very helpful comment, Ken, because one could be mistaken for thinking that our delusions are just like a conjuring trick, that once it's dispelled, there's nothing left. There's nothing else, which would...
No, there's everything.
There's everything, yeah, exactly.
There's everything fresh every moment.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what the words of our Mahamudra Dohas say. Every moment's totally new, fresh.
So it's like now we're just looking at things in the completely wrong way. Wow.
That's it.
Mind-blowing.
The perceiving me and the perceived world. Duality. And when those two delusions go, then the duality goes as well.
Yeah. Hi, Ken. Hi, Ken.
Hi there.
Hi, Charlie.
Yes, Charlie. Yeah.
I done a course many years ago for the Open University called Culture, Media and Identities. And what I was looking at was the meaning of mean, if you know, how we make things mean, how we make sense of the world, you know, and everything that influences and how we experience the world, you know. And it came an idea which I had kind of wrote in the essay for the course was, if we take the example of the tree, yeah, there's actually, what I was proposing, there's actually something there, you know. You can walk up a tree and you'll bang into it or whatever. But what we do is we see a tree and we endow it with meaning, and it's endowing it with that meaning that makes it exist to us, that lets us see what's there. So we look and we see a tree, but yeah, so the mind creating a tree, basically.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we need to sort out for ourselves. That's why I gave that exercise last week, or was it the week before? I forget, but anyway. And it's the difference within Buddhism, the different schools. There is a tree out there. There is a universe out there that we experience. It's our experience. It's our karma to experience the bit of the universe that we do in the way that we do. But it is there. And then there's another part of the Shravaka school who say, well, we'll never know, will we? Because what have we got to know? It's our own senses, our own mind. We can never climb outside of our mind and our senses to check anything out. So it seems like there's a universe of particles, atoms out there, giving us our particular experience of it. Seems like that, but we can never definitively say that what a person with clear eyesight and good hearing and all the rest experience is what is there. We can never say that. So they put a question mark over it. But it seems like there is something out there that we humans experience in the way we do. And then when we come to all of the Bodhisattva schools, they all say it's all mind. It's a mind, and it doesn't change anything, because when you know that, because of the power of mind and the power of karma, if you fall in the river, you'll drown. And if you're in the river saying this river doesn't exist, and so on, you'll drown just in exactly the same way. It doesn't change a thing in the experience, except the way we relate to it.
Yeah. Hi, Ken.
Hi.
You mentioned how a fish perceives water is quite different to how humans might do. I think it's very useful to look at different ways that the animals perceive things that humans do. For example, I mean, you, me, and Charlie might see a tree and see the tree in the same way. But a bark beetle, for example, might say, "Ooh, food."
Yeah, exactly.
And if I say, "Oh, for example, an empty Heinz baked bean can," probably everybody on here has the same image. You know, we all think, "Oh, yes, it's a Heinz empty baked bean can." But if that happens to be at the bottom of the ocean, a hermit crab will say, "Oh, look, there's an empty home that I can reside in, and I'll go and live in it." So, and you know, we can look at videos of how, for example, bees see flowers, and it's so different from the way we see flowers, because as humans, we tend to think that all other human beings see the same things that we do. But if we look at the animal world, that it's very clear that they see something quite different or experience something quite different.
Yeah, that's it. And working out for ourselves what it is, the weight of what, I mean, are we projecting 5% of what's there and there is something there, or is it 20% or 50%? I'm not talking in theory, I'm talking about in actual practice as we sit down in front of whatever it is, a tree or something else. And that's why I ask people to do the exercise in the reality of it. And then, I mean, there's another interesting point, is that there is no way any of us can get inside another person's mind to know how they experience, or another being. No way. We've only got words. People can talk about things, of course. That's a wonderful thing. Human beings can share something. But I've found it's quite mind-boggling. Sometimes somebody you know really well, over tens of years, somebody you're very close to, it can still be, it's surprising when you realize that how the world is for them, emotionally or even perceptually. But we can never know. We can never know.
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, hello. Hello, Alice.
Hi.
Yeah.
I have sort of an idea. I've had it before, but I've just got it again now. Does it matter? Well, I'm sure it does matter, is what I'm trying to say, is that if one's very introverted or extroverted, then possibly that if you're very extroverted, then you really need to see the delusion of that external perception. You know, people are very, whereas I'm more introverted, and so it's very helpful for me to actually see the delusion of the perceiver, you know, really, because that was very fixed in my experiencing. So it's good to take these teachings and then really apply them to one's own experience and how one tends to experience life or something.
Yeah, that's the vital part of it. Otherwise, it's just philosophy. I mean, not just philosophy. Philosophy, I suppose, is in many ways is the finest flower of human mental activity in terms of expression and all its various forms of expression, poetic and artistic as well. But it's certainly not what the Buddhist path is for, which is to actually liberate us at least from our suffering and the trouble we cause for ourselves and others, but more than that, liberate us from ignorance, so that our mind is so clear and true and lucid. And so applying the work to ourselves is vital, and that's the process of the path. And it's also the value of having a really good teacher who can, because there's so many teachings, know which ones out of all that pharmacy are relevant for us just now.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ken.
Great to see you again.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I think we've finished. It was a long, formal talk today. I'm always too optimistic. I think, oh, we'll do all this, and then I don't, but never mind. So we've done the dedication. I wish you a very, very good week till we meet again. And then also, because it's the wood dragon year that starts now. So wishing you all a very good wood dragon year. Okay, take care.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you so much.
Cheers, Ken. Tashi Dele.
Tashi dele, yeah.
Thank you, Ken.